All right, good evening, everybody. I think we'll get started. We allow for a couple extra minutes just for anybody who might be trickling in, but we'll kick it off. Before we get started, just a couple notes. My name is Ian Fogan. I'm the CAO for the City of St. John, so I'll lead through the agenda. We have John Taylor, our clerk, who's going to present as well, and we also invited Phil Ouellette from the Funded Regional Services Commission, and he's got a special seat up here if he wants to join us. At the end, Councillor Killen will also offer some remarks and some insight into being a member of council and the commitments. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you didn't notice, the bathroom locations are down the hallway, and I guess you turn a left across the open area, and they're just right around the corner. We do have bottles of water available for anybody in case temperature can fluctuate in here. Sometimes I find there's a lot of air and it dries you out pretty quick. Over here on this side, we do have handouts from Election New Brunswick. There's two. One is on becoming a candidate and the other is around municipal election financing. And we also have all the slides that we're going to show tonight also printed off. So if you can't see them at times, there are issues with the font and the size, but if you can't see them, they're here as well, so you can grab and go. And also, the session is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if I guess if you're hearing this on YouTube and you weren't able to make it, hello, welcome as well. What's that? No, it's being streamed. It's being recorded and posted later. If there's any sort of emergency that happens, you'll hear the unmistakable fire alarm. And when you go down the ramp here, the emergency exit is immediately to the right around the corner. There's a set of stairs take you right out to the front plaza. And I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to what we're talking about for the agenda today. I would ask that we, if you want, that we do have a paper and pen here too. If you want to take down any sort of questions or anything you might want to ask at the end, it hopefully will make for, some of your questions are probably within those slides. You're probably thinking 2 steps ahead of what we have posted on here. So if we go through the presentation and there's things we missed, please feel free to ask. And we'll take whatever time it needs to answer those questions at the end. And just, I guess, reminders, we're all here to capture up the information, so please be respectful of everybody here, and we'll try to get the session as orderly and organized as possible. So our agenda is up on the screen here. So we're going to try to cover off the role and structure of local government, the role of the administration and the CAO, the purpose of a municipal corporation, and we use those words specifically. So, why it's a municipal corporation, we'll explain that a little bit later. Common council roles and responsibilities, council or committee meetings and meeting procedures, the do's and don'ts for elected officials, Funded Regional Service Commission information and some obligations there. And then at the end, we won't ask these questions, but there are questions that you could consider for yourself. And like I introduced earlier, a personal experience from one of our current councillors. So role of local government. So what do we do? I'm sure you're all familiar with it. You see it every day, from garbage collection, water and sewage, recreation services, transit, etc. You see it out there. There's also roles in public safety around policing, fire protection, emergency planning, building inspection, etc. Infrastructure and maintenance. So yes, we build roads. Not all the roads. Some are provincially owned, but most are municipal roads, sidewalks, street lighting, playground, parks, recreational facilities, and libraries. We also look at urban planning and development. So there's a lot of responsibility around council in their procedures around urban planning procedures, including our zoning bylaws, community development, housing policies, building permits, inspections. Bylaws and regulations, you can also create bylaws and for other purposes, anything under the Local Governance Act, it deems what you deem to be a municipal purpose. You have quite broad control. Your local government structure. So the city has a chief administrative officer. That's me currently. So we have that system of government. And In that role, I'm the only staff member who reports directly to council. All the staff then report up through me. So the system is based on a principle of separation from policy from administration. Council acts much like a board, sets policy, and it's my role to implement that policy and administer it. When we go into administration, this is kind of a more detailed breakdown of what the administration does. So we manage the services and day-to-day operations. We support council by providing timely, impartial information and advice. We also implement council decisions. And with those, sometimes there are different considerations of council decisions. We ensure that the municipality follows laws, regulations, and policy. We prepare budgets, we manage spending, and ensure fiscal accountability, and draft and enforce bylaws. And a lot of the scenes in the preparation time, what we do is there's a lot of work done to align what we operate, how we operate with our capital budgets and with council's priorities. And if you're familiar with it, you've maybe seen it on our website. We adopted a 10-year strategic plan a few years ago. I think we're coming into year 4 of our 10-year strategic plan. And it also contains council's priorities within that council term. And so our job is to make sure that our operating budgets and capital allocation are all aligned with what direction council has given us. And I'm due to report on that in the next couple of weeks up to council with what our work plan will be. So as a CAO in the CAO system of administration, so I'm council's own employee. I oversee all city staff. I oversee the administration of all city services. I'm responsible to coordinate the various areas of administration, including strategic planning and priority setting with council. And it's important there that it says with council, not for council, but with council. Prepare and submit annual city budgets. Oversee the administration of those budgets. And also there's a lot of liaison work that happens with other levels of government and a wide variety of stakeholders as well that we are responsible for. And we also take on the responsibility of keeping both the community and council informed in all matters that may be pertinent and may come up. And John, I'm trying to remember exactly when you were going to jump in here. Is it this one? Does it keep it going? After this one, okay. I knew it was coming up. Right, yes, yep, I got it now, yep. So in the Local Governance Act, it talks a lot about the purpose of a municipal corporation. And this is, I told you earlier, we're going to get into why we call it a municipal corporation. But in the Municipalities Act, or the Local Governance Act, sorry, used to be called the Municipalities Act. Now it's the Local Governance Act. It does clarify that, just what they're doing. So municipalities are created by the provinces in Canada, and therefore we only have the powers that are given us to us by the province. Municipalities are not a level of government under the Constitution and have a certain set of powers and authority within our Canadian system. It's just whatever the province deems. And that's why across provinces you will see municipalities with different levels of authority. In Ontario, they're into health and housing. We don't do that here. That's a provincial responsibility. But it's really up to the province to set what boundaries we operate in. As I said, the Local Governance Act is the main legislation that gives municipalities our power under in New Brunswick. And under the Local Governance Act, our purpose is set out in Section 5. And we listed them here just for reference. It's to provide good government, to provide services, facilities, or things the council considers necessary or desirable for all parts of the local government, to develop and maintain safe and viable communities, and to foster the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the community. So it is quite broad. The old Municipalities Act really were quite tight as to what a council could do. And under the Local Governance Act, which was changed back in 2017, it's much more broad in that you have more ability to really decide what is important to advance on behalf of the community. In saying that, the province does have certain restrictions. So although municipalities are viewed often as institutions of local democracy, we're really not. We're really, in here we call it a service delivery vehicle. The province has mandated or given that authority to local governments to do it. Here's the area where you can deliver services. And that's, I guess that's the boundary by which we operate within that area. Municipalities are also more attuned to the immediate concerns and needs of the citizen. I think this speaks to why municipalities exist and why the province delivers services that way. For most people, local governments are the most direct and accountable political institution, and obviously the closest to the public. So as a result, municipalities have evolved in a manner similar to a business corporation, and their functions are at law often viewed as similar to a business corporation. So in saying that, a municipal corporation, there are different considerations from a different level of government as to how a municipality operates. It's a special type of corporation. There's no letters patent or articles of incorporation. It is created by statute. But in reality, it operates like a corporation. And that way, your council is just like your board of directors. Your mayor is just like your chair, our current mayor, just like our chair of the board. And our bylaws and resolutions are much like minutes and resolutions of a corporation. Municipal elections give successful candidates one vote at the board of directors table. And this is the way municipal corporations are also similar to corporations in that the way disagreements are voiced is at the time of the vote. Once a decision is made by the board by a majority vote, all board members then have an obligation to support it. Now, when we say this, it doesn't mean that you can't voice that, I didn't agree with that decision, and you still have that freedom of expression to say that you don't necessarily agree with the decision, but at the same time, you're a member of the board and you resolve to support the board. So a practical example of this would be, let's say for some reason you're in some sort of negotiation, let's say maybe with a developer or something like that. And the board has resolved to negotiate under certain terms and given direction to staff to negotiate a contract under certain parameters. You may not agree with that decision, but once that decision is made, it gives direction to staff. And if you, as an elected councillor, if you were to go to the developer and undermine those set of negotiations by revealing whatever it is that was discussed and whatever direction was given, you're undermining the corporation which you represent. And that's where things like code of conduct and stuff would come in. So it doesn't undermine your freedom of speech. You can certainly say you have had a difference of opinion, didn't necessarily agree with this, but the board has resolved this, and this is what we're doing. And your obligation then is to support the board and the way they've resolved. And we can have, that's just one example, but this is often an area of a bit of a learning that we can have a discussion on later too. And with that, I'll hand this over to the Common Clerk.
Need to adjust this up a little bit. Just give me a second. See how high this goes. There we go, that's max. Okay, so I'm trying to not go on too long about anything, so I have scripted my speech, and but once, as Ian mentioned, once we're finished, we will answer all questions that you may have. Oh, thank you. Okay, so I'm sure, I'll just move this back a bit. I'm sure many of you know most of the duties of a member of council, but just at a high level, council makes decisions about city priorities, community services, and it sets the strategic plan for the city. And this work often begins within the first few months of a new council. So the current council has its own priorities, which are on the city website. And that would be one of the early exercises that staff would do with council members. Council formally makes decisions by adopting bylaws, policies, resolutions. Council approves the city's annual operating budget and the capital budget. This includes St. John Water. In addition, council continuously monitors the financial health of the city, and that's mainly done through the city's finance, the finance committee, that is. During the budget process, council determines funding levels for the various city services. This is such as fire protection, policing, road repair, maintenance. And once council has made a decision on the levels of funding, the city's tax rate is formally set. This also includes setting the business improvement area levy for Uptown St. John. Perhaps most importantly, council represents the citizens of the city by engaging with constituents and ensuring their opinions and concerns are taken into account before decisions of council are made. Council provides oversight, it monitors the performance of city services, and as Ian mentioned, assesses the performance of the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. And lastly, they make decisions about land planning, including development proposals and property rezoning. Whoops, I went backwards. Let's go forward. So, role of the mayor. So the mayor's primary role is leadership and strategic direction of the council. At council meetings, the mayor acts as presiding officer, or also more commonly known as chair. An effective mayor acts impartially at the meetings, and they treat all council members equally with respect. And this helps facilitate an open and fair discussion period. In St. John, the mayor only casts a vote on a motion to break a tie. The mayor acts as the official spokesperson for council. This would include with the media, other levels of government. The mayor would work closely with provincial officials. And the mayor acts as a representative of the city for community events, formal events, initiatives, ceremonies. And you may see the mayor out once in a while in, when you are mayor, you get to wear the city robe and chain of office. So that's usually saved for very formal events, but Mayor Reardon has worn it more often than it's been worn in the last few years, so it's great. Additionally, the mayor is one of the key signing authorities for the city. And what that means is that all of our contracts, agreements, bylaws, they must be signed by both the mayor and the clerk in order for those to be considered legal documents. In addition to all these duties, the mayor serves on various other agencies, boards, and commissions and committees, including the council standing committees, the Fundy Regional Service Commission, which you will hear from their CEO later on, as well as many other boards. The city has around 30 boards, agencies, boards, or commissions to which we appoint citizens, and council members often serve on some of those too. Deputy mayor. So what is the role of the deputy mayor? Well, when the mayor is absent, the deputy mayor assumes all the powers of the mayor. Or if the office is vacant, so the deputy would automatically become the mayor. Other than that, they really have the same powers as a council member. Nothing additional, only if the mayor is absent or unavailable. Councilors. As you know, councilors engage with the community and their constituents. They consider the well-being and interests of the whole community when they make decisions. They bring forward issues to council that can support and promote the welfare or interest of the city. They can do that by bringing motions to council. They take part in developing and evaluating local government policies and programs, and they do that continuously and provide feedback to staff. And they attend and participate in council and committee meetings. So what are the positions available in 2026? It's 11 positions total, as I'm sure you all know. One position for mayor, 2 councilors at large, that would mean representing the whole city. And then we have 4 wards. I have a map of the ward map next. So 2 councillors in each of the 4 wards, so a total of 10 councillors and 1 mayor. And how is the deputy mayor selected? Well, in St. John, traditionally it had always been the councillor at large who received the largest number of votes in the election. But in 2021, council changed the policy or the bylaw on that. And so now it can be any of the 10 councillors. So you don't have to run at large. There's a process for deputy mayor, but it can be any of the 10 councillors. There's the ward map. Hopefully you can see it okay. There's also copies of that. This is accessible through the city's website as well. And salaries, it's important to know about the salaries and benefits if you're running for council. So these are the 2026. Mayor's position is $101,000, deputy mayor just under $49,000, and councillors $37,435. Weekly pay with the City of St. John. There's also the option to opt into dental and health benefits that we offer here at the city. In addition to all that, the council members each have a budget each year for various things. So currently we have an allotted $3,000 a year professional development budget. And that would be for training or any educational pursuits that the council member wanted to pursue. A $1,500 community grant fund. And that's for nonprofits and local community organizations where council members want to help out. For instance, if a community organization needed a bench or something like that, a memorial bench, they could use that money towards that. In addition to that, there's a $1,000 fund to attend community events. So we used to call it the ticket purchasing fund, but it has rules. We have policies for all of those things. And it would be to attend an event in the community, to buy a ticket to a dinner that's fundraising, things like that. And lastly, of course, council members, they receive a laptop or iPad. We used to issue iPads, but we're going to be transitioning to laptops, an email account, a Microsoft account, as well as a smartphone. So those would all be provided upon being elected. Okay, and council meetings. So, as most of you are probably aware, regular council meetings are held every 2 weeks on Monday night. And it almost always begins at 6 p.m. We don't have to, but I'd say 99% of the time it's a 6 p.m. start time. If there's a holiday on the Monday, it's on a Tuesday. The meetings are open to the public, as you know. They are broadcast on Rogers TV. And we web stream them and put them on YouTube, and that's linked to our website. Meetings are conducted according to procedural bylaw. So that's the bylaw that dictates how the council meeting functions. It's quite a detailed document. It's roughly 35 pages of boring details, but they're important if you're a council member to understand them. And that's part of my role, is to understand them and to assist council members if they have questions, procedural questions. That's part of what we do in the clerk's office. And these are based on, if any of you are familiar with parliamentary rules, it's based on Robert's Rules of Order. So I would say I've only encountered a couple times where our procedural bylaw didn't capture something that happened at a meeting. If it doesn't, it's written into the bylaw that we refer to Robert's Rules of Order if there's something that's not covered in our bylaw. But with the amount of detail we have, we've pretty much covered everything. In addition, council makes decisions at the meeting by voting on motions. So that is how council officially speaks. It's not any other way. It's not discussion. They actually have to take a formal motion, a mover, a seconder. The mayor calls the question. If it passes, it becomes a resolution of council. And they also enact bylaws. So our bylaws are our legal instruments here. We have a general counsel's office who helps draft those. And in order to pass a bylaw, it has a more rigorous requirement where you can't just do it at one meeting, you have to do it over a course of 2 meetings. Some bylaws have public input. When we change any zoning bylaws, things like that, there's an automatic public hearing required, and that's provincially legislated. But most bylaws don't require public hearings. So citizens would, if they're unhappy with the bylaw, they can write to council, and that's how they would express their opinion about the bylaw. We also have special and emergency meetings. So I should also mention, if you're planning to run for council, you should really keep your Mondays open, because although we meet every 2 weeks, what we call the off Monday, a meeting can be booked on that off Monday at the discretion of this person, the CAO. If there's a lot of city business to conduct and it's urgent, he can call a meeting. That's the only time that staff can call a meeting, because it's written into the bylaw. Otherwise, the mayor or 3 members of council can call a special meeting. And they would call those types of meetings if there was an urgent matter. We probably do roughly 5 to 10 special meetings a year, just to give you an idea. And usually they're in the evening, usually starting at 6 o'clock. There's also emergency meetings, and they can be called for any emergency. Like if one thing that the council does in a city is they are the body that can declare a local state of emergency. So if there's a disaster in the city, for instance, one year, one was called because of the amount of, I think we called it Snowmageddon we had uptown. It was causing dangerous conditions for, ambulances or fire trucks. And so the state of emergency was called, and that gave the city special powers. That would be the time you'd use an emergency meeting, is to declare a local state of emergency. And again, these meetings can be scheduled on any day, so that these are a little bit more unpredictable, but generally you won't be surprised by them. There'd be plenty of notice if we're going to have a special meeting or thinking of one, and we try to be respectful. We understand, most council members are working, some working full-time, and we try to do them in the evenings. Oops. I skipped one. There we go. Okay, and next are committee of the whole meetings. You've probably heard about these. So these are designed to be less formal, and they have fewer procedural requirements. More open to discussion, more comfortable environment. We have those, there's a room next to this, and we call it the committee of the whole room. That's generally where council holds those meetings. And they are scheduled every 2 weeks as well. So we schedule those right before the council meeting. So I would say to most people here, you should try to ensure that you'd be available to be at City Hall for 4 o'clock on Mondays. Because usually they start at 4:30. But we'd provide a meal because we're here for a while, so council members can come in at 4 o'clock, get a meal, start in committee of the whole. And as I said, so we can hold discussions here, but the most important thing is they can't actually make a decision at committee of the whole. They can only have a discussion. If they want to make a decision on a matter at committee of the whole, it has to get forwarded to council, and that would happen the same night. So as clerk, I would have all the motions that council wanted to consider from closed into open, and I would announce those at the start of the meeting. So we are very open and transparent with it, in the sense that I would read into the public record the full resolution that's being considered by council. And also, if it's coming from a staff report, let's say we were looking at, there are many reasons you can meet in committee of the whole. One of them would be if the city was negotiating to purchase land. Well, of course, you can't do that in open session because it could compromise the negotiation. So there would be a staff report enclosed. It would explain the situation, and it would say if council wishes to proceed, here's the resolution you would adopt. They would discuss that. And if they wanted to proceed, then staff has to prepare a one-page summary that describes the report, as well as add the proposed resolution, and that all gets added to the public record. The agenda gets updated with a supplemental agenda, and people are able to access that. The other thing to consider about the council obligations would be council's standing committees. So we have right now finance, growth, public safety. I would say finance meets roughly 10 times per year, finance and growth. So they're monthly, but in the summer they don't meet as often. So it ends up being around 10. There could be the odd other meeting. And public safety is quarterly, or it may have, did it move down to, it's quarterly, yeah. So those are the obligations there, and those standing committees, they consist entirely of council. So there's no citizen, they're committees of council. 5 members on each committee. It doesn't have to be chaired by the mayor, so in these cases it gives an opportunity for council members to chair them. And they operate on the same rules as committee of the whole. So it's more of a discussion, less procedural rules, and so you can discuss things a little bit more freely. Again, though, you can't make decisions, so you can have the discussion, and they act the same way committee of the whole does. They take the recommendations and they forward those to council, and then so we actually have a space on our council agenda called committee reports, and it's coming from finance, growth, or public safety, and it will outline the issue with the recommended proposal. And then the council member that acts as the chair of that committee would be the actual spokesperson at the meeting to address the issue with council and to make the request to council. And as I mentioned, so those are the meetings that you would have to be involved in as council members. But as I said, we have 30 agencies, boards, and commissions, and and you're going to hear from Councillor Killen later about the time commitment to give everyone an idea of that. But council members are usually on 3 or 4 of those as well. So it just depends on, and those aren't managed by the city, so we don't always know what the schedule would be, or you know, we don't have all the information, like an example, like St. John Energy, Pro Kids, you know, Transit Commission. There are all kinds of them, and on most of those, you'll find a council planning advisory committee. We have 2 council members on that, and that's quite a time commitment. So, you know, council, when a new council comes, that's part of the discussions, is we try to figure out everyone's schedule and what would work for them, and then talk about the different committees and look at where we can place various people. And that's all, of course, the decision is made by council. So council ultimately decides who goes on which committee. And they have a nominating committee of councillors who does most of that work for them. And council meeting procedures, we talked about some of them already, but all council and committee of the whole, all council and committee of council meetings are governed by the procedural bylaw, which I already mentioned. The meeting agenda packages are typically provided to council members 3 days in advance of the meeting. I'd say 90% of the time we achieve that. Sometimes things are coming in late, and so it might, you know, council might not get it at the exact time they're supposed to. But also, not only do we give it to council, so they can be roughly 500 pages plus of staff reports, all the material that would accompany it. And we also, as most people probably here have already seen, but it's posted on the city website, accessible to the public, including all the documentation. So the public can access all the same reports that council members are going to be discussing and making decisions about. So in order for a meeting to begin, we do need a quorum at every council meeting. A quorum for St. John is 6 people. And as you know, we mentioned this, but the mayor chairs all meetings of council and committee of the whole. But for standing committees, that's an opportunity for other council members to chair. And of course, if the mayor's absent, the deputy would take over as chair. In a situation, and it's happened a couple times, I think, in my time here, where the deputy and mayor aren't available, then they select a councillor to take the role of chair. But I would say most of the time, both are available. And now, I guess another important feature of council meetings that's changed in the last number of years since COVID really would be virtual participation. That was not permissible in the legislation before, but the provincial government updated their legislation. And now, if you watch council meetings, you'll see usually every other meeting, there's usually one council member who's participating, and they'll show up on the screen. They can hear and see everything. They can participate like every other member, and it's totally permitted without restriction by the provincial legislation. It's not, I mean, it's not the same as being here. I would say you lose a little bit, but it works pretty well. Okay, and I think I mentioned this already, but council can only make decisions by formally voting on motions. So again, it needs a mover, seconder. Mayor calls the question, and council members vote by showing their hands. So in most circumstances, a majority vote of council members who are present at a meeting is the threshold for a motion to pass. So it depends how many are there, that the threshold changes, but it needs to be a majority. But there are a few circumstances where you need 2/3 majority. Very rare, but it will happen once in a while. One example of that would be there's a provision in the procedural bylaw that if you want to suspend the rules, you can do that, but you need 2/3 the majority, which equals 8 people. So, because to suspend the rule, you don't want to be doing that all the time, but sometimes the rules get in the way of conducting council business, so you can suspend them. And again, you just need that higher threshold. Another time would be if you want to rescind a motion, that means to cancel a motion that council's already made. You need 2/3 the whole of council to rescind a motion if you haven't given advance notice. So that would mean you have to give advance notice to the public that you consider to rescind a motion. And then at the next council meeting, you can rescind it with just a simple majority. But if you try to do it at the same meeting, you would need the higher threshold of 8 people. So those are just 2 little examples. Okay, and the last part for me, and then we're going to move on to Mr. Ouellette, but just at a high level, kind of, I just called it the do's and don'ts for council members. But this is pretty high level advice that you would see in most places. So again, it's important for council members to act in a very honest, open, ethical, and transparent manner. That language is also written into your code of conduct. So we do have a code of conduct bylaw that outlines, and you'll become very familiar with that if you're elected, and I would encourage you to read it carefully. The bylaw, that would guide your behavior, and it also would set out the sanctions that if you were to contravene the bylaw. There's also provincial legislation about conflict of interest. So the province requires any council member who has a conflict of interest to actually, we have a form, and it's still in paper, unfortunately, and it's provided by the province, so we can't really change it, but they have a form where you would fill out, if you had a conflict of interest where you would benefit or your family or friends would benefit from a decision of council, you're going to fill out this form and you submit it to the clerk's office. We keep that form and it becomes a public document. So the public could say, I want to see all the conflicts of interest of this person or just in general, and we were required to provide those. So it's important you always stay on top of that. People also will tend to remove themselves from meetings just if it's a perceived conflict. You might not actually have one, but if the public perceives that you do, sometimes you want to err on the side of caution and not partake in that discussion or decision. So it's important that council members understand the difference between governing versus managing the day-to-day operations. And again, the CAO touched on that, but that is the role of the CAO. So you really, shouldn't intervene with, frontline staff, maybe say, why didn't you plow this road or not plow that road? That's communication that should be made with the CAO. As staff all take their direction from the CAO, and the CAO takes their direction from council. So in St. John, we generally, whoops, I hit a button by accident. In St. John, we generally, we give guidance to council members that they can communicate directly with the CAO, or other senior staff, and the CAO has communicated that out to council. So they would be able to contact department heads. They don't have to put everything through the CAO in St. John because we're a pretty big organization. But in some places, if you're a smaller city, everything should go through the CAO as it is their only employee. Council members, it's important that you work as a team and accept decisions made by council, and that was already mentioned, but it is in your code of conduct that you support the decisions of council, even if you disagree, and you can disagree in a respectful manner, but it's, you can't try to actively undermine in the public a decision that council's made. And council should prioritize the interests of the city as a whole when making decisions. And that would even include ward councillors. Like, ward councillors are the difference between them and a councillor at large is you were elected by the people that live in your ward. They're your constituents, and you're going to be the person who they generally contact. But when you make a decision, it shouldn't just be about the ward. It should be what's best for the organization, what's best for the city of St. John. Council members should actively and respectfully participate in council meetings, and there are rules to that too. If you're being offensive or rude, there are ways to handle that within the procedural bylaw, so it's good to just be cordial as you can be. Sometimes things get heated, but there's no need to make insults or use derogatory language and things like that. The mayor has the power to ask you to leave a meeting if you contravene those rules. And finally, council members must maintain confidentiality with any information they are provided in their roles. And you will have access to a lot of confidential information. Some of it can be cabinet confidences from the province, and it's illegal to share that. So, and you'll have access to information about, labor negotiations, property matters, legal matters that, the city might be involved in. And so those were the things that you want to do, but what to avoid would be, again, you don't, well, I made a little statement. I know once I start talking, sometimes you miss some important points, but breaches of the code of conduct or the conflict of interest laws can result in sanctions by council. It can result in reputational damage and possibly legal troubles. That said, individual council members should avoid the following. Back to interfering day-to-day operations of the city, making decisions on your own. Again, only council can make a decision. A council member can make a proposal to council, but if council doesn't accept that proposal, they can't make that decision. It has to go through council. Taking advantage of your position for personal gain or for the benefit of family and friends. Obviously, that's a conflict of interest, and that can get you into trouble. And sharing the private and confidential information that you acquired through your role as a councillor, that is a breach of the code of conduct, and there could be consequences for that as well. And again, council, I don't think I mentioned this, but council is the body that determines what sanctions it would administer for a code of conduct breach. And there'd be a whole investigation. We have an independent lawyer that investigates these things if there are breaches. And it's just something that really you wouldn't want to be involved in. It's not a pleasant experience oftentimes, so we highly encourage to avoid that. And that's all for me. So I will be here though, if you've jotted down any questions. I know I covered quite a bit. We're going to move now though over to Phil Willett. And once Phil's done, we're going to hand things over to Councillor Killen to maybe give you a personal account of what to expect and her experience as a council member. Oops.
I'm not as tall as John.
Oh, I know. You're good?
Yeah,
It
that's
goes
good.
down quite far.
That's good. I'm not that short. Thanks.
Thank you for being here, and I should start by just indicating that this Regional Service Commission slides, it's a smaller piece. You've got a much larger platform to think about as a councillor and potential mayor candidates in this role, but it's still something new, and it's something that should be reviewed at this stage, because several of the members that are involved in the Regional Service Commission have shared with us that they did not know. They did not know the level of involvement of regional work when they applied to run municipally. And so it's worth just starting right away so everybody can have the same information. As I was introduced earlier, I'm the CEO of the Fundy Regional Service Commission. I happen to have worked here before, so it's a familiar space for me, and nice to see some old colleagues and friends. I'd like to start just by saying that yes, you're considering to run at a municipal level, but several of the things that you will deal with at a municipal level really are societal challenges that transcend the boundaries of your municipality. And you will discover, or you have already discovered, that you can't solve it yourself. You need a bigger collective to get through it. And the province agrees with that and provided essentially mandates for regions to come together and tackle some of these issues together. Not to duplicate, not to replace, but to say, y'all should work together on this. And here's the things you should work on, and I'll review that with you. So, what are those themes that come up? Work together. Find some ways of saving money. If you work together, is there economies of scale? Can you access more influence or more funding if you come together as a region? The answer is yes, that it does work. It does not all the time, but if you can do it, yes, go for it. You can plan for infrastructure more critically and more strategically. You can reduce duplication, or you can find efficiencies in your operations. In our region, I'm going to jump to the slide, and I'm going to try to go as fast as I can to offer some time for questions and to hear from Councillor Killen. This is our region. St. John is the largest member by a lot. There is weighted voting within the Regional Service Commission, which I'll get to in a little bit, and St. John has over 50% of the weighted vote because of the size of it in comparison to the other members. But we are surrounded by a lot of diversity in the types of communities that are in this region. We have obviously a more urban community. We have more rural communities within there. We also have larger towns or developed towns, and some that have experienced a lot of change recently with their boundaries because of local governance reform. Now, the mandates. The easiest way to start is when people think of the Regional Service Commission, they think of solid waste, because that's where one of the services we have. And this started way back when we started talking about regions should work together, or communities should work together. It was around solid waste. They said, well, you shouldn't all have a solid waste station. There should be one, and you should figure out where it goes, and it should all go there. And that was legislated, and that was happened in the 90s. Since that time, different mandates have been added to that. So it started with this idea of solid waste commissions, and then it grew from there. We also have local planning for some of the service that we provided. We do not provide planning to the City of St. John. They have their own planning shop. Now, I'll share a bunch of other services, and this is what I want to clarify. We do not have a police force or fire department, nor do we, but in our region itself, I think there are over 30 to 40 public safety organizations, fire, police, EMO. They're all over the place, different volunteers in different towns, and we have a responsibility to see if we can make them to work together. We have transportation from a regional standpoint, the social mandate and community development. We have 5 regional facilities as a region. They're all premised here in St. John, and we have economic development and tourism promotion through Envision St. John. So those are the primary mandates that are given to the region. Similar to the local government structure, we have, and I liked the slide earlier that the Chief Administrative Officer in Fogan provided, which is that we are a body of a corporation, and we have a board. We have a CEO that runs the administration of that organization. Same setup, except we're called the board, not a council, and we have a CEO, not a CAO. But same essential structure. For us, the mayors are the primary delegate to the Fundy Regional Service Commission Board, which makes decisions. However, the mayor can have up to 3 alternates that can come to these meetings instead, or can be used for some of the committees that we have. So for St. John in the past years, the deputy mayor has served as the primary delegate to the Fundy Regional Service Commission. So Deputy Mayor McKenzie has been with the Fundy Regional Service Commission board. And then we can also invite council members to the board, to the committees that we have. Okay, the most challenging part of regional work is that you have two hats on. You are elected as a mayor, as a councillor, and then one day you're going to be asked to say, well, what's the right thing to do as a region? And you're going to want to take off your regional hat and think locally and say, well, what's the best for St. John is this. But for regional work to work, you sometimes have to transcend just that local focus and say, what's the greater good? And that's very difficult in a region, especially when you have a mandate and you have constituents that elected you to represent them in your particular ward or your particular community. So I'm being totally upfront, that's the hardest part of regional work, is that you've got to be able to wear two hats. For the mayor or the deputy mayor, in the case of St. John right now, they do that. They go to the region and make decisions while finding that balance between, well, this is really important to St. John, but this is very important to the region. And everybody has to do that for it to be successful. And I would say, and Deputy Mayor McKenzie would probably attest to this, is everybody's doing that compromise all the time in order for it to work. And we're quite lucky in our region because we have a really strong group of partnership across the region. There's a couple ideas on the slide. I'm not going to read through them in terms of what it means to be regionally minded, but I think I've passed on the idea. Okay, so for meetings, this would be primarily for the mayor or the delegate, the primary delegate. We have one monthly meeting. It's about 3 hours in length. It's probably about a quarter to a half of the size of a biweekly meeting agenda packet of the city. So you give you a little bit of idea of what it would entail. Board members do tend to sit on standing committees, and that can take additional work from 4 to 12 meetings a year. So it does pile up pretty quickly. Board members are also on the executive, so we've kind of got a trifecta, unfortunately, for Deputy Mayor McKenzie. He's the chair of a committee. He is the vice chair at the executive level. So we end up using him a lot in the regional work. He does quite a bit of work, but many people might not know that, and why we're sharing it is this is a balancing act if somebody is taking on one of these roles, and you should be aware of it in advance. There'd be weekly correspondence with the FRC head office and the administrative staff through me. And there is a monthly allowance that are provided. It is not as large at all as what is provided at the municipal level because the requirements aren't as significant, but there is some, and then we also pay for mileage as well. For the council members on the other side, much lighter. You would have access to all the board materials in advance. You may communicate with your primary representatives. You receive a monthly newsletter to make sure you're up to speed on what's happening regionally. We would usually have 1 to 3 meetings a year with the council as the RSC. So you'd see us and we'd interact. We also host a regional summit for all the council members across the region to try to collect that input, the priorities, to try to make sure that the direction of the regional organization is guided by the interests of our local members. Last slide is really just, there's tons more information. It's on our website, and I'll be around for a little bit. Also, you have individuals who've interacted with it. Deputy Mayor McKenzie would be a great resource if you have questions, but thank you very much. And also, I should also mention, I've done a couple of these across the region. Thank you for considering to run at municipal level. It's an important part of our democratic system in the province, and it means a lot to see this many people interested in having a role.
Thank you, Phil and John. I'm just stepping up for a second here. So in the next slide, we have some of these questions to consider. I'm not going to go over them. They're probably self-evident, things you've thought about yourselves. Even when I reflect on the do's and don'ts slide, I would say that those are some of the things we've picked up that are really best practices for highly effective boards. if you feel overwhelmed by the amount of information, including some, like, I know John Taylor, our clerk, loves the bylaw stuff, but, procedural bylaw, how many pages did you say that was, John?
Sorry?
Procedural bylaw?
35 pages, roughly.
So I don't have 35 pages of procedural bylaw memorized, and I doubt any member of council probably has 35 pages of procedural bylaw memorized. But we do, after municipal elections happen, we do have quite extensive council orientation sessions. So we will spend some time getting council together to make sure they work cohesively as a team, focused in on, on the governance side, on the strategic planning functions, and really setting your direction for your executive of the city. We do, I found that's what really works well from a council board. And you do have a professional administrative staff. I know one of the do's and don'ts said about communication through the CAO. That's the official way, but we do have a great staff here. And council very quickly gets to learn as to who to reach out to when they have a question or they need information. I'm not the gatekeeper and the knower-all of everything, but that's just the official way of doing it. But anyway, the important thing is with staff, it's council sets the governance, they set the policy, and it's up to staff to implement that. And if they don't, either I have to hold them to account, or if I don't do it, then council holds me to account. That's the level of responsibility for doing that. But anyway, so just some questions to consider, and I think and this is probably a pretty good lead-in for Councillor Killen to give us and share some of her thoughts.
Thank you, CAO Fogan, and thank you everyone for coming here tonight. So I am here to tell you, I guess, what it's really like on council, and Councillor Lowe doesn't want to hear about it apparently, but that's totally fine. So yes, good evening and thank you for having me. Because I think from the outside, people often imagine council to be, this very simple thing. You sit in meetings, people debate, votes happen, and decisions get made. I was on the Arts Board, the Police Commission, chaired the Growth Committee, the Ad Hoc Government Reform Committee, and I currently serve on the Industrial Park Board and Public Safety. And yes, these are all part of the fun. But the real experience of being on council is a lot more complicated than that. It's people, it's pressure, it's process, it's history, and it's responsibility. And it's a lot of time. It is trying to make the best decision you can with the information you have and knowing whatever you decide, somebody is going to be upset. That is just part of the job. One of the biggest things I've learned is that getting a motion across the finish line takes more than having a good idea. You need to understand process. You need to build relationships. You need to do the homework. You need to talk to people. You need to listen, and you need to know when to push and when to wait and when to bring other people along. So much work happens before anything gets a vote. And I think that surprises people sometimes. And you heard a lot about sort of what goes into the process here tonight. A motion may look very simple on paper, but behind that one motion, there's weeks and months of conversations and research and feedback and strategy and figuring out what is possible. Council work is not just about being passionate, it's about being effective. And another thing you learn very quickly is that this city is bigger than any single one of us. Council members come and go. We are a 4-year blip in the life of a city. And I actually think that's a very important thing to remember, because the city was here before us, it will be here after us, and the decisions we make become part of a much longer story. So you really have to keep that humility about this role. You're not here to become the story. You're here to help steward the city for a period of time and to do the best you can with that responsibility and hopefully leave things a little better than you found them. And part of that means is recognizing that we are often dealing with issues that have been building for years and sometimes decades. I was inundating the CAO with pothole articles that date back as far as the 50s. And in the 50s, they actually said, oh my gosh, we have roads. They actually didn't care about potholes in the 50s. So this is something that just we all have to deal with, and we have been dealing with for decades, if not over a century. We have old infrastructure, old policies, old tensions, old patterns, and old mistakes, unfortunately. So even when people want immediate answers, and understandably so, municipal government is often working inside the systems that are much older and much more complicated than they appear. Another big part of council that is a lot of the job is responding. responding to concerns, to questions, to complaints, to emergencies, and to issues that are not always technically yours. I have heard about the dump a few times. And, it still lands in your inbox anyway. People on council or come to council when they are frustrated, confused, worried, or when they feel like no one is listening. And even when something is not directly in your lane, part of the job is helping people navigate that, pointing in the right direction, advocating when you can, and making sure they do not feel dismissed. That matters. There's also a really rewarding side to the work, and that's when you get to make something concrete happen. For me, one of my favorite examples comes from that $1,500 that you get for a community initiative. Mine was Bayshore, and I don't know if you've been down there lately, but it used to be a little dirt pile that you would park on, and now it's beautifully paved, and there's signs, and there's a bench, and there's a garbage can, and there's all these wonderful things that happened, not with just that $1,500, but with working with staff and working with my colleagues to see the brilliance of this tiny bit amount of money to do something big and impactful. So you do actually see impact, and you can actually have impact. You just have to be a little patient. I do think it is important, though, to be honest about the social media side of your work, because that has changed public life completely. On one hand, social media makes people more connected to what council is doing. It can raise awareness very quickly. It can help service issues very quickly. And it can create access. But on the other hand, it can make this work a lot harsher and a lot more personal. It means people often react instantly, sometimes without the full context, and sometimes with a level of intensity that follows you home and in public, and that is real. It affects your personal life, it affects your family, it affects your friendships, it affects how people see you, and sometimes how safe or comfortable you may even feel in your own community. And I do not think people always understand that part. They may often see us as punching bags. Another difficult thing about council is that decisions are not abstract. You're not making decisions in some sort of distant place that will affect people that you never meet. You're making decisions that are in your own community, decisions that affect your neighbors, your friends, your family, and people you deeply care about. This can be hard because sometimes what's right for the city as a whole may not be what that one person wants or what that one group wants or what someone close to you wants. And you have to be able to sit with that. You have to be able to separate your personal relationships from your public responsibility. And that takes resilience. Honestly, resilience is probably one of the most important things that will build you up in this role, because you're not going to make everyone happy. You're going to disappoint people sometimes. You're going to frustrate people. You're going to absolutely infuriate people. And if your goal is to avoid that completely, you're probably not going to be able to lead very well. Because this job is not about making every single person happy in every single moment. It's about trying to make responsible decisions for a whole city. And in our case, that means keeping the big picture in mind for more than 80,000 people. That's responsibility. You have to keep asking what is fair, what is sustainable, what serves the broader good, what are the long-term consequences of this decision, how does it help, who does it hurt, what are we missing? You have to care about individual stories because those stories absolutely matter, but you also have to zoom out and make decisions with the whole city in mind. And sometimes that is absolutely the hardest part of the job. So when people ask what it is like to be on council, my honest answer is this. It is meaningful. It is frustrating, it is humbling, it is exhausting sometimes, it is incredibly important, and it takes a lot out of you as a person. It asks for patience, it asks for courage, it asks for perspective, it asks for resilience, and it asks you over and over again to keep coming back to the bigger picture. At the end of the day, this role is not really about being liked. I know I've actually made some of you mad, actually. It's about being accountable. It's about serving with integrity, and it's about doing your best to help move your city forward, knowing full well that you only hold on to that role for a short time and only have one vote. And maybe that's the point. We're here for a chapter. So the question becomes, what do we want to do with that chapter while we have it? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so any questions?
I don't want to follow that. So that was great. Yeah, no, I'll just facilitate if there are any questions for any of us, or if you just want to discuss afterwards. If you don't want to raise your hand in front of the group, we'll stick around and feel free. But if there's any broader questions, sure.
I had a question about a couple of things. When the deputy mayor is acting as the mayor, do they still also act as a councillor in that they would be voting on proposals?
That's a John question.
Yeah, that's a me. So your question was, does the deputy mayor vote if they're chairing the meeting?
They are acting as mayor because the mayor is absent.
No, only in the case of a tie, so they become the mayor essentially. Yeah, so the mayor right now only votes if there's a tie, and it would be the same rule applying to the deputy mayor.
Thank you. You did mention that the meetings of the council, they are open to the public. What extent of engagement does the public have? Or what sort of things can be coming to chip in with what the council is doing?
Sorry, you mean like the meetings? Yes, they're open to the public, and you're saying what level of engagement then do the public have in those meetings? Mostly it's, well, most of that work is probably done behind the scenes in interaction directly with our counselors. There are a couple different layers. There are public hearings that John talked about. There are some zoning bylaws that, in order to be implemented, those are public hearings, and there's time allotted for people to speak in favor of or against whatever the consideration is. There's always, you can submit letters at any point in time. Those go on the agenda. I will say, as long as they're appropriate and respectful, they go on the agenda. If they're not appropriate and not respectful, they do not go on the agenda. So there's different levels, but also when you talk about bylaws that have to be enacted over two sessions of council, there is a pause in between there for the members of the public to reach out to their councilors and express what they like, what they may not like. But yeah, there's different ways. I don't know if I totally answered anything. John, do you think anything?
The only other thing I'd add is sometimes the public does present to council, but the public can't, I guess, I'm wondering if you're getting at, can the public participate when they come to a council meeting? No, they can only participate at a public hearing, and they don't have to, they can just show up and speak to it. But they can ask council's permission, like if they wanted to present to council, they would submit a letter saying, I'd like to present to you on this issue. Council would make a decision. If they decided yes, the group or person would be invited in. But other than that, they're not allowed to interrupt a meeting. So the meeting's just for the council. And as the CIO said, but the council can discuss letters of citizens that are submitted to the agenda, and we include all those as long as they meet the criteria. And they're, as the CIO said, they can't, make allegations against, unfounded allegations against staff or be disrespectful, things like that would be the exceptions.
And all the material is also provided too. So the material that they have for council is provided as well on our website to the public. So you have the same information. And there you go.
I had a question about once the council decision is made, it's the obligation of all councilors, whether you agree with that decision or not, to support that decision. Does that go to legacy decisions as well? Like if in the council, previous to the one that you're going to be on, there were some hot items or something that you disagreed with, do you, if you are voted in, and even if you were campaigning on disagreement to that item, are you obligated, once you're voted in, to support the decisions of past council?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, yes, specifically in the Local Governance Act, it says that whatever decisions are made by previous councils carry forward. So the only way you would be able to change that would be to bring a separate, have council adopt a separate resolution to change a previous decision. It's a good question.
I would just add, though, I wouldn't want to give the impression that you can't, like you can verbally disagree with things. It's just you can't actively, like if there's a decision of council, you have to abide by it, especially if it affects you as a councillor. But you can be critical of past decisions. So, yeah.
But in your work, you're doing your best to make the best of that
Right, yeah, and even I've heard council members say that, look, I don't really agree with it, but council made a decision and that's life and we're gonna move forward.
And here's how we could move forward. Here's how we make the best of it. All that kind of, like, that's still perfectly open. Yep. All right. Oh. Yeah, so go ahead.
It's true that each city council will have to be in some committee. How many are?
How many committees are required?
Yeah, there's not, it's not a requirement, so you're not required to be on them, but there would probably be pressure from your other council members if like one person says no and you can do, you can ask the people here. It is a bit of a, as I mentioned when I was speaking earlier, when you first get elected, one of the first big meetings we have to show all these agencies, boards, and commissions that are looking for a council member to be appointed to it, and then we have to have the discussion. But most people are on, like, I would say 2 or, like, how many are you on?
I'm on 3 or 2 right now. So.
Two outside of, but then there's finance, growth, and public safety are the committees of council. Well, I guess there's no rule saying you have to. So really, the only rule you have to abide by when it comes to the council meetings is what the provincial legislation says. You have to attend all council meetings. You don't really. There's no provincial rule that wouldn't allow you to. I can't think off the top of my head. I don't think there's anything in the code of conduct. I just think if you refuse to be on any other committees outside of council, it would be more of an interpersonal problem you might have with other council members.
I'm just wondering if John can clarify, because I know the mayor's budget's a little bit higher for attending events and professional golf. I don't know if they're there or off the top of that, but your pocket.
No, I don't know off the top of my head, but the mayor's, you are correct. So those figures I showed earlier apply to the council members, but the mayor's office has its own budget. And so it would be determined on an annual basis, like if they want to put a bit more, maybe there's a lot of events. And, I guess the rationale behind that is the mayor is the spokesperson of council. So they are going to have to attend more events in general than the rest of the council members. So they have some money in the budget. But each year the budget has to get presented to council or to the finance committee, then to council. And so it's not the same every year, but it is slightly more than council. I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't know if you do, Mayor, but it's not a whole lot more, but it is more.
Is there a time that council could vote who would
Yeah.
not be on council if we missed tonight?
Well, that's where provincial legislation comes into play there. So in the Local Governance Act, if you miss 4 consecutive council meetings, you'd lose your seat. So it's not even a decision of council, that's provincial legislation. Yeah, so now there is an exception. If you were ill, or there's some, personal circumstance, you could ask the permission of council to grant you leave, and then your term would not be automatically terminated. But if you just fail to show up, I'm obliged as clerk to write the province and tell them this council member missed this many meetings, and they lose their seat on council. 4 consecutive regular. So the biweekly meeting, if you miss 4 of those in a row, without permission of council, you would lose your seat. Yeah.
But if it's time, you're 6, June 15th, and you're 6, August 20th.
It doesn't matter. No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only in a row. Yeah, 4 in a row, basically.
You might have an issue like that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I hate to say, like, you can miss a lot of meetings, and it doesn't end your term. Yeah, no, you could miss every second meeting, and you're not breaking that rule. I'm not encouraging that, but. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I have a fairly demanding full-time job. I'm just wondering how many counselors work full-time and like what that balance looks like.
It doesn't. I said that on the radio. There's not much balance, honestly. Like the fact is, like you do have to start at 4 on Mondays a lot of the time. I'm lucky to have a flexible employer who's aware of my position on council, and I think that can be a conversation. Like sometimes people are really proud that they have someone in their team on council. So I do think that discussion can be had, but primarily we have teachers and retirees right now. And so teaching, it works great, but it's certainly something to discuss because it's not super accessible for people that have demanding jobs. I will say that, yeah. Eric.
So I think a great overview on the governance of the council and the interface with the Regional Service Commission, but many of the challenges our community face require partnership and collaboration with the province and the federal government. So I'm curious if you could just highlight the role of councillors in working with the CAO and other city officials, the other orders of government, and requirements and how that works.
Yeah, sure. So the intergovernmental affairs type portfolio, those kind of questions. So it probably does work on both levels. There are many times we do try to keep it as a staff to staff and elected officials to elected officials type of relationship. Now, oftentimes as it goes on, I can think of, provincial or federal officials who, have worked with the city long enough that they know who to reach out to get something quick rather than going through a municipal official. And I can think of the other way around too. There are certainly provincial staff members or federal staff members that councillors may know that rather than go through an elected official. So, you do find a way to get things done, but officially there are, there are official, like I said, in order for council to act, it's through resolutions. When there's policies around applying for funding. So it's not, staff can't go out and apply for funding that wouldn't align with our policy. We can't go out and do things that council wouldn't approve. And the same thing of councillors, they wouldn't be able to go out and chase some initiative or try to implement something on their own. Has to go through our policies and procedures.
Can I add one thing to that? Sure. It's like, so one thing I learned too is that the province often will have stuff that they set into motion 2 years before we would have even arrived on council, for instance. That was one big one we ran into where the timelines have such overlap. Then you add that funding from the federal government and you're in a real timeline disaster of how and when we can actually come in as a city and say, no, this is how we'd like to contribute and this is what we're going to contribute. Ian and the team and folks have been working on some of these agreements for sometimes months and years. Main Street's a great example of a project that took all levels to achieve and was on a timeline that sometimes was not ours. So that was a very stark realization of like the patience you have to have with your funding partners.
Joanna, can you just describe how, it's important, like you have the question about engagement.
Yeah. Yes.
One aspect of the role you highlighted, and I'm just curious if you could describe how staff support counselors to communicate accurate information, perhaps engagement, and awareness of what's going on in City Hall. Because I think obviously reflection, I think it's part of the role.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's a lot of trust. I mentioned the trust piece that you do have to build with city staff and people that you work with. This is a really giant team effort. And so in terms of what they're hearing on the ground, what you're hearing on the ground, there may be different conversations happening because like I mentioned, you're coming to them or people are coming to you when it's like a last resort. It's like, I need you, help me. These folks are often working with people who are submitting surveys, who are taking a lot more time to engage with staff on what needs to be completed or worked on. And so I often feel like I am the one who receives those emergencies and those like, oh my gosh, things versus staff who have a lot more time to invest in like the patient understanding of what people really want. And oftentimes, because people are coming to you in emergency states, you're not actually seeing a full picture. You're only seeing senses of urgency. So it takes their work and to trust their work to know what the people are really seeing and feeling, because we can't just do that by engaging on social media or with a few phone calls. It takes the patience of them. So Does that answer your question? Sort of. Is it with like people in the streets? Mm-hmm.
Some are harder to reach than others. Some people don't even have a phone.
Yeah.
I suppose what I'm asking is, at this present moment until now, how does city staff or city council ensure that we're giving all the champions voices that are not involved in
Mm-hmm. I know that's an important part of the nominating committee, is to ensure that we are attracting the right types of folks to those positions, because they're direct to us. Like, those are people who are serving on from everything from public safety to the arts. So we can have a myriad of topics that exist there that people can get that direct engagement with. And our nominating committee, I feel, does a really good job trying to attract those that aren't normally participants, and which is what I've appreciated through our DEI efforts and everything that we've taken on too as a city, which is not stuff that you necessarily see. And like I said about this, what city staff does, we don't engage we don't do engagement unless we're out there on the streets, knocking on doors, showing up with town halls, and putting things in mailboxes. So like, this stuff is a lot more grassroots. In the Royal Gazette, like, we have to post things in the newspaper. So this stuff is very traditional, I find, in terms of how they engage. And I've been really proud to see it, that it isn't just like, fill out this survey online and like, then we're good. I really don't think they do that. They're not really allowed to do that. The point is that they're trying to engage with as many people as possible in as many ways as possible. So you may just not see it, or you might not feel it, which I understand. Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that, yeah.
Yeah, so it always is a difficult circumstance, I think, to reach everybody, and oftentimes the different channels. In the last strategic planning exercise that we really went through, we spent some time on that. What was the appropriate level of engagement? How do we get people more engaged? What do we post online? Do we do radio ads? Do we do newspaper ads? Do we do flyers? Do we talk about it at council? Eventually you will find that person that says, well, I don't listen to the radio, I don't read the paper, I'm not online, I don't have a phone, at some point in time, it's like, well, I can only do so much. We talked about that during our strategic planning, that there is also a civic responsibility. In Canada, we have this peace, order, and good government of society, so there is some obligation on us as citizens to also reach out to be participants in our society as well. And so trying to draw that line is tricky. We try to accommodate as much we can as far as accessibility and choosing the right medium in order to communicate messages. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's also a balancing act of how much resources and time do you put to consulting and reaching out and communicating versus actually getting some work done. So, and it depends on the issue. How urgent is it? Like, our strategic plan took a couple of years because we wanted to spend time developing that. Now, if you're talking about, flood watch coming up, we don't have a couple of years to get ready for that. That's a more urgent one, right? So sometimes it might depend, but I don't know if depends is maybe the right answer, the quick answer for you, Eric.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a popular graphics being circulated around council students, and it would suggest that it's more eyes on, hands off, which seems contrary to some of what you've presented. Insofar as that councilors make motions, councilors also are involved in requesting more information, make adjustments. There's many tools, I guess, that help to further engage city staff, right?
Oh yeah, and that certainly is certain. Like, we shouldn't undersell the amount of effort that could be there, and that you can do outreach, communicate, try to gather information to make more decisions. Is not an obligation. So you could have counselors who are largely disengaged and don't do any of that, and they're still in charge of making that same decision versus other people who are fully engaged and doing lots of work. So yeah, so there is that. But I would say once the decision is made, it's really a role of a professional public service to implement that. And we give that lecture to staff all the time about, it doesn't matter if you agree or not. If you don't like the decision, you know what? You can go run for council too. Like, and if you don't want to do that, then you're a member of the public service. Your job is to implement.
I guess my point was just before or against the
Yep.
decision. That's part of the council's role is to advocate and train.
Absolutely.
You motion for.
Yep.
As opposed to dispersion and seconding stuff.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. That's how a lot of things get done. Yep. It's a lot of initiatives get started is from council initiatives. Yep.
You want to speaking to how it's important to talk to staff, because senior staff will have report discrimination.
Yeah.
They might be doing something.
Yeah. No. Yeah, for sure. On what staff are doing. So yeah, many times there could be a couple of different ways of looking at that. There could be previous decisions that they're working to implement. There could be various projects within planning that are already down a certain road. But there also could be part of the CAO role is present an annual work plan. And so it gives council the idea of what we are going to be working on this coming year. Now, you'll see in that work plan, you'll also see things that we had planned to do last year that we didn't complete. And sometimes it gets pushed. And sometimes the reason it's good reason sometimes it gets pushed is because something else came up. And it's also the staff's role, I think, to weigh in and give that advice that, hey, this new thing, it could be very important, maybe it's minor, maybe it's whatever, but we need to gauge that with the work plan that we already have and really set the new priority as that other piece gets layered in. Is it number one? And at times it can be number one. We have these things that come up that you're right, everything else in the work plan, we're gonna stop or pause, or we're gonna put this as number one, and we go forward with that. But yeah, no, so there's different ways. And the capital projects is a primary one that just comes to mind. Flooding issues. As counselors, you're gonna hear about flooding issues. And the reality is that staff can't prevent all flooding issues. Sometimes there's work we can do. Sometimes there's work that have been ongoing for years that we're trying to alleviate. Some of it is effects from private property. We have a provincial highway that runs through the middle of the city that has culverts that may impede how much flood water we can move from one side to the other. So it's not all us that, it's sometimes out of our hands. So, reaching out to staff, it is a valid point. Reaching out to staff, sometimes they do have a lot of background information and can help you, even when you're talking to, members of the public. We can help give that background. So. Sorry, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm entirely.
I think, so was your question, sir, so if you were a counselor, could you make it so an expert had to come to give their own opinion?
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah,
could, but you'd have to convince council. So again, you're one person, so if you came to council with a motion of your own, and this might touch on something you were talking about earlier, but one way council members can affect change, they can come up with any concept they want, and they fill out a notice of motion and give background information. They can do all kinds of research. They can consult whoever they want. They submit that to council. Council considers it, and they have to decide. But again, as one councillor, you couldn't do that. No.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
How soon post-election does the new session begin, and should one be taking time off for that orientation period? Like, is that orientation period a number of days in a row, or what's the timing?
Yeah, we're working on that schedule right now. So the way we have it lined up right now, the election date is May 11th. then we're allowing for a period of, any recounts or anything like that that has to happen. We're looking at May 25th as a day for swearing in. That would happen in the evening. But the first official council meeting, according to the schedule, is June 1st, I want to say. June 4th? Well, first would be, if it's the 4th, the first would be Friday. I can't remember. The first Monday in June, anyway, is what we're targeting as the first meeting of council. So there are certain pieces that we're lining up in order to have an effective council meeting. I think we do have to spend a little bit of time on the procedures bylaw and around governance. So right after that May 25th date and before the first date of council, there may be a couple of evenings in there that we're targeting in order to go over some procedures and governance to get a first meeting out of the way. We're also looking at, are there any land use implications coming up in the short order right after that? And if there are, then we have to get a teach-in on zoning and land use planning in order for council to make those kind of decisions. And the other thing we really heard that was important from this council, and they found useful, and I don't know if Councillor Killen may have an opinion on this, maybe she has a different opinion, but was around some of the team building. So what we're going to try to do as well is spend some time around, teaching of all the city services and budgets and the policies and some of the strategic plans. Like we're council is at that board level, but you need to know what plans have already been previously adopted and what directions council has already set the city in. So we're going to spend some time on that, but we're going to try to do it in a fashion that kind of, rather than just, one person up here lecturing a group, we're going to try to do it in a fashion that's a little bit more team building.
I still have my binders. It was like this.
Oh,
tall. Yeah,
So-
it was crazy.
Yeah, we did try one time of drink from the firehouse.
Yeah,
I
we did
will
the
say.
drink from the firehouse, and when Paul and I started, Councillor Radnott and I, and Councillor Stewart and Councillor Ogden, we had our former Armory General as the CAO. So bless his lovely heart, we won't say anything ill about General Colin, but you have a much different type of leader here in Ian, and so you will probably have a really fun time getting to know the city. And we actually did a really fun bus tour. We did. Yeah, John was such an interesting guy, and we learned a lot from him. But he literally led like a general, and you have it's a little more delineated than that with Ian. So, but the bus tour was a really good idea. That was a lot of fun. We got to see the water, sewage treatments. It was awesome. It was very cool.
Fun touring
times.
at a water treatment plant. Anyway.
You learn a lot.
But yeah, so we are trying to line up that, so it is, it's not all boring, but there are some things that we will have to push pretty quickly in order to have an effective council right off the bat, and including any sort of land use decisions. That's keenly what we're watching right now, but other pieces. Yep.
The binders?
We won't give you 8 binders full of, no. The one thing I will say over the period of decades, we should know this by now. We've only been around 200 years,
Yeah.
but the one thing that we should know is that as much as we went through the information here tonight, we say to be an effective board, here's where the level you should be looking at. You should be setting policies, you should be in governance, and then every now and again, staff will invite you in to an operational decision. When that's on us. We shouldn't be doing that. And it opens the door, and anyway, and it ends up, well, I'm not gonna say it ends up badly. It doesn't always end up badly, but at times it's then difficult to retract and shut that door and say, no, please go back to just making policy decisions and governance and let us do that. So, at staff, we are cognizant of trying to keep it at that policy and governance level.
Thanks for coming to see us tonight, everybody, and good luck in your
Thank you very much.
campaigns.